Yo guys, what's up? It's Tyler D back with part 2 of the story. Want to try and pick back up where we left off. I know where we left off on the story last time. I was about 18 years old. Had gone through some things, told about the story about giving up my daughter for adoption. That guy named Kevin splitting and then losing my friend there in high school. So to pick it back up after that, you know, the alcohol, the addiction, all that stuff was just continuing to spiral out of control. I would hide in my room listening to music, you know, and like I was saying before, had started DJing and things like that. Around the time I was 19, I was still working for my dad at the truck garage. Learned so much there. Learned, you know, strong work ethic, things like that from him. I'm grateful for that. But he came to me one day and was like, I know a guy, it's got this house. He's tired of renting it out. If somebody pay him what they owe on it, they could have it. So it was $20,000. It was here in West Central neighborhood of Fort Wayne. And man, I went and looked at it. It was destroyed. But I took advantage of the opportunity. Luckily, my mom being in mortgage lending, the loan process was really smooth. So long story short, bought the house. House payment was $235. But it was in such a bad state of, you know, condition. It took me about 8 or 9 months, you know, give or take. Every night after work, I'd go over there, do a little bit of work on it. On the weekends, I'd go over there and work on it. So, you know, totally, you know, gutted the place. Kitchen and bathroom got completely gutted. Learned a ton of skills along the way. Met a lot of people. Long story short, I was 19, 20 years old and moved out on my own, into my own house. So, back to that thing I was talking about where like alcohol and addiction and drugs and things like that were getting out of control. Imagine being 19, 20 years old. I had no rules. I had nobody watching over me, telling me what I could or could not do. Was still working for my dad, making good money. Had expendable income based on the low house payment. So needless to say, the addiction and things like that started to just increase, get even more crazy out of control. Pretty soon I turned 21, could get the alcohol myself. At that point, I mean, it's total free reign. Around that same time, one of my best friends growing up moved in with me. And here we are, you know, a couple guys, and had this bright idea that, you know, we could probably generate some extra income if we sold some of this stuff that we was doing. Never a good choice. Never a good choice. So along those lines, you know, one thing leads to another. We, you know, start small. Pretty soon there's tons of traffic at the house. Things are coming and going. I mean, things are getting moved by the pound. Things are getting really crazy at this point. You know, with that comes stress, comes all kinds of different stuff. Were we making some extra money? Sure. Was it the right way? Absolutely not. But what happened was there was one time where, you know, it was normal that there was 5, 6, 7, 8 people at the house at any given time, you know, because it was just kind of come and go, in and out. Well, me and a friend was back in my room. I was practicing on the turntables, had some other friends, they were out in the front room. You know, people would knock on the door, my friends would let them in. It was just, there was no peephole on the door, so I mean, you pretty much just opened the door and that's how it was. So what happened was, I'm back on the turntables, and all of a sudden, I look over to my left, and this dude comes running in my room with a bandana on his face and a gun about this big, and he just comes in and he's like, get on the ground. And at first I thought it was a joke, and then the second dude walked in. So this was not a joke. You know, somebody knocked on the door, kicked it in. They dragged me out of the back room because they thought stuff was in my room. Most of the people that knew us knew it wasn't in my room. It was always in my roommate's room, and we always had this little joke because I'd get frustrated with him because it was every time I'd need something, I couldn't find it. He'd always put it in a different spot. So here these two dudes drag me out in the living room, and by this time, they've already got about 5 of my buddies face down, hands behind their back, keys, wallets, and phones all on my bar. So they lay me down too, and I just hear my bedroom starting to get destroyed. It's just, you can just hear things flipping, getting ripped. And then it gets quiet for a second, and I hear, "You in the blue, get up." and I was wearing a blue hoodie at the time. So they picked me up. They couldn't find it. They're frustrated. So they start dragging me around, gun to my head. And I'm telling them like, okay, I'll show you. So we go in my roommate's room, and I'm looking through all these things, and I can't find it. Opening drawers, closing drawers, and I'm opening this drawer, and I see this big stack of cash. And first thing in my mind is, dang, if I give them that stack of cash, there's gonna be somebody else with a gun coming at me. So I tried to close the door real quick. Bad move. Dude just smacks me in the face with the gun. Takes the money. Long story short, man, I get frustrated. They're frustrated. It's a heated situation, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where it's at. I don't know what to tell you. So they drag me out in the dining room of my own house and start, kicking me, punching me. I'm down on the ground, just getting kind of dealt with, and all of a sudden I feel the gun right in the back of my leg. And I feel this dude lean into it, and I hear him say, like, man, I should just blast you. And I thought right then that was it. I thought that was it right then. And then I hear my roommate's voice out of my ear, and I look over, and out of the corner of my eye, I see him like this. He's like, yo, leave him alone. I'll show you where it's at. Leave him alone. So they leave me alone. They go back there with him. Everything gets really, really quiet. And all of a sudden I hear, count to 100. Don't nobody follow us. Bang! Gunshot. I'm laying there with my eyes closed as tight as you can close them. And I'm just laying there like, oh my goodness. I'm gonna go find my best friend dead. Like, what have we done? What have we been doing? So I lay there. It might have been a minute. I don't even know. It felt like an hour. And all of a sudden I feel something tap on the back of my leg. It's my roommate, and I hear him say, yo, T, they're gone. And like this relief came over me for a minute. But then the fear and the realization, I looked out the side window they shot out. It was a hole this big in the house next door. Thank goodness it was a triplex and no one lived upstairs, because it was a hole that big. And so here I am making these kind of crazy choices, living this crazy life. Like, what am I doing? So after that, I was scared to be there. So we pretty much split. My buddy went back to his mom's. I moved back in with my mom's for a little bit. Pretty soon I moved back in there after the dust settled and things like that. Me and him kind of parted ways. We didn't really live together anymore. I still continued those activities for longer than I would like to admit. But that's one of the most scared I've ever been, and it was directly tied to my choices. So here I was trying to support my habit, earn a little extra money, and look what almost happened. Could have lost my life right there. From there, things are I'm just moving at the speed of light, man. Drink every night, smoke every day, still working, still partying, going hard, going out, DJing at the club on the weekends. And around this time, my now wife kind of comes into the picture. And we at first were just gonna hang out, and we started hanging out more and more. She started learning the turntables with me. It was a lot of fun. It truly was. So here I am, probably 21, 22 at that time. I decided to sell that house and bought the next house. So bought the house for 20, sold it for around 34 if I remember right. So here I am again, this alcohol addict kid, walking around with a check for $14,000. I put the down payment on the other house, and then I got all this extra money that seriously was not a good thing. I couldn't even begin to tell you how much of that went up in smoke and other things. So I'm burning the candle at both ends, man. DJing at night, partying at night, getting up, sort of going to work. I was physically there, mentally just exhausted and was a mess. But continued to work on music, loved music, just anything I set my mind to, I went hard at it, including the bad things. But going out in bars and stuff like that, my wife ended up introducing me to this dude here in town. he was in a local group, and she was like, man, you guys would probably hit it off. You guys both are into hip hop. You guys love making music, things like that. So went and met this dude, and man, we ended up hitting it off really well. Became good friends. He was in a group at the time that was doing shows around town and things like that. So I started going out to the shows and just kind of hanging out, and good time. I mean, these guys just had fun. There was already one DJ in the crew, so there was already 2 turntables up on there, and these guys kind of invited me into the family. So before too long, they invited me to kind of be a part of it. So here we are doing shows. At one point there for a while, we were doing shows like every other weekend, and it was always at a bar. So it just made continuing to drink, like, it was just a way of life, man. It just was. So being at the bar all the time, drinks were easily accessible, and I would usually even bring a bottle with my DJ gear and have that, so while I'm buying drinks, I'm also doing shots on my own. Things just getting crazy out of hand. Pretty soon we started working on an album. The studio was at my house, and for so long, man, we would make music, whether I was making the beats or something like that. Alcohol was just a part of it. Smoking, drinking, every single, they went hand in hand. It was like I couldn't do one without the other. And again, back to the whole formation of the habits. It was like every activity had to include alcohol and weed, and man, it just continued to spiral down and down and down and down, and then people didn't even realize, because like on one wall in the studio it was all records. And it got to the point where I was beginning to hide it. Like, I didn't want my wife to see how many bottles I was drinking, so for every one I'd put in the trash, I'd hide one behind the records. And just so, it was bad enough that she saw the one, but there was more. There was always more. So things get going, man. I went at that pace for a long time. Pretty soon, decided I was going to go to college. Up until this point, I had no real plans to go to college, but knew I loved music. Something crossed my path called Full Sail down in Orlando, Florida, Winter Park, just outside Orlando. So kind of without thinking too much about it, man, applied, took out a ridiculous amount of private student loans, which is a whole nother thing. Don't ever take private student loans out. Still paying them to this day. But anyway, me and my wife, my dad had a semi, and we loaded everything we owned, both of our vehicles, and moved to Florida. And we're there for almost 2 years. I rented out the house that we lived in. After graduating and stuff like that, decided we wanted to move back. So before we moved to Florida, I ended up a lady that I worked with at Fridays. We were kind of friends, barely knew each other a whole lot at that time. But she ended up getting pregnant. So that's when I had my oldest son, who's 18 now. He's an amazing dude. It's a true blessing. But it was definitely another one of those things where it was like, man, after having my daughter and giving her up for adoption, and then I had to go tell my mom that, man, did it again. She was clearly not thrilled. And right then was right around the same time that I met up with my now wife. So after moving to Florida, obviously I had to move back. I had already given up my one child. I didn't want to do that again. Couldn't do that again. So we moved back, and that's kind of when I started working sales jobs. And going from doing construction to working sales jobs and drinking the way I was and having no idea how to eat or anything like that, man, the weight really started to come on. I think for a long time I wore like 36s, and pretty soon it was 38s. Before you know it was 40s. By this time I was working at Sweetwater here in town, and I had gout so bad in my feet, my ankles, knee, my elbow. There was sometimes that my kids saw me crawling up the stairs because I couldn't even walk. And here I am, like 27, 28 years old. It's crazy. It was continue down a path of destruction, because I never dealt with anything. I just continued to drink and drink and drink. And I would drink, easily take down a flask of Captain Morgan. and it's pretty crazy. So to speed things up a little bit, that went on for quite a while. Around when I was like 28, down in the studio by myself. Me and my dad had kind of parted ways somewhat ever since when I left and then moved back from Florida. We just kind of lost touch. We didn't stay in touch as much as I wish I would have. Me and my brother even, remember we even said like, man, we got to get things right with Dad, because before you know it, we're going to get a call and he's going to be gone. Now at this point, he wasn't even that old. But I was at home in the studio one night. My wife was out. No kids were home or anything. It was just me working on music, drinking, of course. And it's like, if I remember right, it was 12:01. And I'm upstairs going to the bathroom and my phone rings. Didn't recognize this number, but had a weird feeling. Just had this weird feeling. So they leave me a voicemail. I'm pouring another drink, and I listen to the voice message, and it is my stepmom, Becky. And I can barely make out the words because she's so upset. But what I could make out was, he's gone. Dad's gone. He's gone. Call me back. And that was it. So everything that me and my brother had joked about just became reality. My dad was 56 years old. He wasn't feeling real well at work on a Friday. Went home, told the guys he was gonna go home take a nap. Came in, told my stepmom he was gonna take a nap. Went back and laid down, never woke up. And still to this day don't exactly know what happened. Pretty sure it was either stroke, heart attack, combination of the both. Turns out he had stopped taking his blood pressure medicine that week. He was hard-headed, just better not to do things like that, but he liked to do his own thing. So man, that hit like a ton of bricks. And at the funeral, my brother had made a collage of pictures of my dad. And when my dad was younger, he was definitely overweight. He was heavy, had alcohol issues, and what hit me was I'm standing there, talking to these different guys that I'd worked with, different people from the past, and like 6 different times. I'm standing there with somebody and people would be like, man, I forgot how big your dad used to be. They'd pause for a second and they'd be like, well, you look just like him. And they weren't specifically trying to tell me that I was heavy, but they didn't have to. I knew I was. At this time, I had to be wearing 42s. Double XL shirts were tight. And so I look over at the casket and there's my dad laying there. And at this time, I already had 2 sons. And I was like, I'm literally walking in his footsteps. And it just hit me. I was like, man, I'm gonna end up in the same early grave if I don't make some changes. But the messed up thing was, I didn't know how to make any changes. And that's the wild thing about addiction and alcoholism and things like that, is once you get so far down the rabbit hole, things start to look really hopeless. Because I had lived my life in that way for so long that I didn't know any other way. And the thought of not doing that stuff was almost a joke. Like the thought of not smoking every single day or drinking, like it didn't even seem like an option. But as time went on, I was miserable. I was miserable in the things that I was doing. You can only go at that pace for so long, and it takes a toll on you. So a few months go by, and of course losing my dad just fueled the alcohol. Here I am knowing that I need to make changes, but it's not what I did. And driving drunk was something that I did for years. I mean, it was an absolute normal thing. I could tell you so many stories about people finding me behind houses, finding me in driveways. I woke up in a trailer park one time. One of the craziest ones is I left a party by the airport, don't remember driving. I woke up the next morning with a gun in my face. I was behind a farmer's house all the way across town, behind his house parked next to his barn. Don't even know how I got there. But I remember talking to my neighbor and was like, man, sooner or later I'm gonna get DUI. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And a week later, I was at my own house, drank a pint of Jägermeister, had a couple beers, and decided I wanted a Nacho Bell Grande from Taco Bell. I got this picture I have to share with you where it looks like I tried to make love to one. Like straight up, there's nacho cheese all over me. Like my fly's even down. Straight up, don't know how that happened. But, so I left the house and got pulled over. I ended up in handcuffs looking at Taco Bell. A true story, Taco Bell ain't sounded good since then. But here I am, I'm locked up, I'm in the back of a cop car. And so they put me in a room with 5 other dudes. There was no beds. They gave me a little green mat to lay on. And that's the moment where things really got real. That's the moment that I was staring at the ceiling, and I'll never forget. That was the first time I genuinely prayed. It was like, you know what, God, here I am. Broken, a broken man. And I'm only coming to you because I need you. Just like everybody else does. I've disregarded all the things that I've known and tried to do it myself, and now I need you. And I remember saying, if you can help me get out of this, I'll spend every day for the rest of my life trying to repay the favor. I didn't know how I was possibly gonna make the changes. And for so long, I was so miserable. Like, I hated the way I was living. You know, the thoughts of killing myself had become extremely real because of it. And after having that time to lay there and sober up, my wife had to bail me out, and she was pregnant with our daughter at the time. And I thank God she did this, because she knew what she was doing. She brought my 2 sons with her to bail me out. So after laying on that jail cell floor all that time, I walk out of lockup to my pregnant wife and 2 sons. And that image is burnt into my mind. I could tell you what they were wearing. Because how did I get there? How did I get to this point? How did I become the man that I never wanted to be? And it was my habits, my choices, my addictions. All these things finally were catching up to me. You know, and it was, when you have thoughts of suicide, it's a really scary place. But at the same time, things get extremely clear. At least they did for me. Because really, you have 2 choices at that point. You either do it and be done with it, and that's that. Or you decide that you are going to do the hard work that it takes to repair things, to fix things. But what that meant was I knew I was going to have to deal with all those skeletons in my closet. But thankfully that day on the jail cell floor when I asked God for help, He showed up. He showed up for me. So all I'm doing today and every day up until today and every day for the rest of my life until my time comes will be to keep showing up. Like, the keep showing up phrase to me goes extremely deep. And a lot of it is tied to that. Because it was that pact that I made with God. It was that decision. It was that choice. It was that agreement. And he showed up. So now I got to show up every day. And I have to keep showing up. So that was where the changes needed to happen. Man, that's about it for part 2. I would say that's definitely, a lot of what led up until that next phase. The next phase is all those nights that I would see that infomercial up drunk and I would tell my wife about it, talking about this P90X program that I kept seeing. At this point, I had already started trying to lose a little bit of weight. We had an elliptical machine and I would use that every single day, but it just wasn't cutting it. It wasn't exactly doing, but I was so inspired by stories that I saw on this P90X thing, and I just remember thinking like, man, I can never do that. But, anything's possible. Thankfully my wife saw something in me that I just hadn't seen yet. And that's where part 3 is going to pick up. So this has definitely been enough for part 2. Big thing I want you guys to understand, man, is you just got to keep showing up. Just like he shows up for you. You just got to keep showing up every single day. It matters. You matter. You're worth it. So, into part 2, we're going to pick it back up with part 3. And a lot of my friends that know me from the whole Beachbody change and things like that, that's around the time where things started. So, start of part 3, that's where we're going to be at. So, appreciate you guys. Don't ever lose sight of what matters most to you. Never give up what you want most for what you want in the moment. So, decide, commit, succeed, all those things. But the main thing is keep showing up.